The rain fell in sheets across the city sidewalk, turning the evening into a blur of gray and shadow. Maya huddled beneath the broken awning of an abandoned storefront, her thin jacket doing little to keep out the cold. At 19, she had learned that the world could be cruel, but tonight felt particularly bitter. It had been 3 days since she'd eaten a proper meal, and the shelter had been full again. Her stomach ached with emptiness, and her shoes, worn through at the soles, squelched with each small movement. She watched the well-dressed people hurry past, umbrellas shielding them from the downpour, none of them sparing her a glance. She had become invisible, just another piece of the city's forgotten landscape. When the tall man in the expensive coat stopped in front of her, Maya assumed he would tell her to move along. Instead, he simply stood there, rain dripping from his dark hair, his gray eyes studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was no pity there, no disgust, just a quiet curiosity that made her uncomfortable. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice deep and unexpectedly gentle. Maya wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the question. Of course, she wasn't all right. Nothing had been all right for months, not since her mother died, and the medical bills consumed everything they had. But something in his steady gaze made her hold back the bitter retort forming on her lips. "I'm fine," she lied, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. The man didn't move, didn't look away. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the percussion of rain on pavement. Maya felt tears prickling at her eyes. She was so tired of being strong, so exhausted from pretending that she could survive another day like this. Before she could stop herself, before her pride could build its usual walls, the words tumbled out. Could you just pretend to hug me?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "Just for a second. I know it's strange, but I need to feel like someone cares, even if it's pretend." She braced herself for rejection, for the man to back away from the crazy, homeless girl. Instead, he did something that would change everything. Without hesitation, without judgment, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her in a warm, genuine embrace. It wasn't pretend at all. Maya felt herself break, tears streaming down her face as she sobbed into the shoulder of this stranger's expensive coat. He didn't pull away. He simply held her, one hand gently patting her back, as if she were someone worth comforting, someone who mattered. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're going to be okay." And for the first time in months, Maya almost believed it. When Maya finally pulled away, embarrassment flooded through her. She had just broken down in the arms of a complete stranger, soaking his probably $1,000 coat with her tears and rain. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, wiping at her face with shaking hands. "I don't know what came over me. I shouldn't have asked you to." The man shook his head, cutting off her apology with a small smile. "Don't apologize for needing kindness. I'm James, by the way." He extended his hand formally, as if they were meeting at a business conference rather than on a rain-soaked street corner. Maya hesitated before shaking it, acutely aware of how dirty her own hands were. "Maya," she whispered. James studied her for a moment longer, then glanced up at the darkening sky. "Have you eaten today?" The question was direct, but not unkind. Maya's pride wanted her to lie again, but her growling stomach betrayed her. She shook her head mutely. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here. Would you join me for dinner?" Maya's first instinct was to refuse. She had learned that nothing in life came free, that every kindness had a price. But something about James seemed different. There was no predatory gleam in his eyes, no hidden agenda in his posture. He simply looked like someone who genuinely wanted to help. And the truth was, she was so hungry that her hands trembled. "Why?" she asked, needing to understand. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" James was quiet for a moment, rain continuing to fall around them. "5 years ago, I was in a dark place," he finally said. "Someone showed me kindness when I desperately needed it, even though I didn't ask for it. They didn't know who I was or what I would become. They just saw someone who needed help." He met her eyes directly. "I've been looking for ways to pay that forward ever since. So, will you let me buy you dinner, Maya?" No strings attached, no expectations. Just a warm meal, and maybe some conversation if you're willing." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that cut through all of Maya's defenses. She found herself nodding before she could overthink it. They walked together through the rain to the diner, an unlikely pair. James matched his pace to hers, seeming not to notice or care about the stares they received. When they entered the warm, brightly lit restaurant, the hostess's expression shifted from welcoming to uncertain as she took in Maya's bedraggled appearance. "Table for two," James said smoothly, his tone brooking no argument. "Preferably somewhere quiet." The hostess recovered quickly, leading them to a corner booth. Maya slid into the worn vinyl seat, suddenly self-conscious about the puddle of water forming beneath her. But James simply settled across from her and handed her a menu, acting as if this were the most normal dinner date in the world. "Order anything you want," he encouraged. "And I mean anything." Maya's hands shook as she held the plastic menu, the words blurring before her eyes. When was the last time someone had told her to order anything she wanted? When had she last sat in a warm restaurant, surrounded by the comfortable chatter of other diners, the smell of coffee and cooking food wrapping around her like a blanket? She ordered carefully, a burger, fries, and soup, trying not to seem too eager, too desperate. James ordered the same, along with 2 cups of coffee and a slice of apple pie to share. When the waitress left, an awkward silence settled between them. Maya stared at her hands, folded on the table, unsure of what to say to this strange, kind man who had stopped his evening to help her. "You don't have to tell me your story if you don't want to," James said gently, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup when it arrived. "But I'm willing to listen if you need someone to hear it." Something about the way he said it, without pressure, without judgment, made Maya's carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the warmth of the diner, or simply the fact that she had been alone with her pain for so long. Whatever the reason, she found herself talking. She told him about her mother, about the cancer that came on suddenly and aggressively, about watching the strongest woman she knew waste away in a hospital bed. She described the medical bills that piled up despite insurance, the way debt collectors called at all hours, the eviction notice that came just weeks after her mother's funeral. "I try to keep working," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was in my 2nd year of college, studying to be a teacher. But I couldn't afford tuition and rent and food all at once. I thought I could figure it out, that I could survive until I got back on my feet." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out once you start falling, it's really hard to stop. Lost my apartment, then my job, because I had no address for the paperwork. Lost my spot at the shelter because I missed curfew when I was trying to find work. It's like the universe conspired to kick me when I was already down." Tears threatened again, but she blinked them back. She had already cried enough on this stranger's shoulder. James listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful and sad. When their food arrived, he waited until Maya had taken several bites, practically inhaling the burger in her hunger, before he spoke again. "I lost my father when I was 16, he said quietly. "He was everything to me, my hero, my mentor, my best friend. When he died, I went off the rails. Started drinking, getting into fights, failing out of school. Everyone expected me to take over his business, but I was drowning in grief and anger." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "One night, I was sitting on a bridge, seriously considering whether life was worth continuing. A homeless veteran sat down next to me. He didn't know who I was, didn't care. He just talked to me like I mattered, like my pain was valid." "What did he say?" Maya asked, drawn into his story despite herself. James smiled, a distant look in his eyes. "He told me that pain doesn't last forever, but the decision to give up is permanent. He said that my father would want me to honor his memory by living fully, not by destroying myself. Then he shared his sandwich with me, probably the only food he had, and sat with me until dawn." James met Maya's eyes across the table. "That man saved my life with his kindness. I went to rehab, got therapy, eventually took over my father's company. I tried to find him afterward to thank him, to help him, but I never could." His voice grew softer. "So, I help others instead, whenever I can. It's not about charity or pity. It's about recognizing our shared humanity. Maya slept in a hotel room that night, the first real bed she'd experienced in weeks. After dinner, James had insisted on getting her a room at a decent hotel nearby, along with some cash for immediate needs. No strings, he had repeated firmly when she tried to refuse. Just a safe place to sleep and think about what comes next. He had given her his business card with his personal cell number written on the back. "Call me tomorrow if you're willing," he said. "I'd like to help you get back on your feet, but only if you want that help." Maya had stood in the hotel lobby long after he left, staring at the card in disbelief. James Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Industries. She had accepted help from a billionaire without even knowing it. The hot shower felt like heaven. Maya stood under the spray until the water ran cold, washing away days of grime and exhaustion. The hotel had provided basic toiletries, and she used them gratefully, watching the dirt swirl down the drain. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a fluffy white towel, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the face looking back. Her cheekbones were too prominent, her eyes haunted and hollow. But beneath the exhaustion, she saw something she hadn't seen in months, a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Maybe this wasn't the end of her story, but a new beginning. She ordered room service for breakfast, another luxury she couldn't quite believe, and ate slowly, savoring every bite. As she finished her coffee, she pulled out James's business card, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. A quick internet search on the hotel's business computer confirmed what she'd suspected. James Mitchell wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the youngest billionaires in the country, having transformed his father's modest manufacturing company into a tech empire. Articles described him as brilliant but reclusive, more focused on innovation than publicity. There were mentions of various philanthropic efforts, quietly funded programs for homeless youth, and job training initiatives. He had been serious about paying forward the kindness he'd received. Maya sat back, overwhelmed. Why had he helped her specifically? What did he expect in return? But even as the question circled, she remembered the genuine warmth in his eyes, the careful way he'd made sure she felt dignified throughout dinner, never once making her feel like a charity case. He had treated her like a person worth knowing, not a problem to be solved. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the hotel phone and dialed the number on the card. Her hand shook slightly as she waded through the rings. James Mitchell, his familiar voice answered, professional and crisp. "Hi," Maya said softly. "It's Maya. From last night. I'd like to take you up on your offer, if it's still available." They met at a coffee shop that afternoon, one of those independent places with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. James was already there when Maya arrived, dressed more casually today in jeans and a sweater, looking less like a billionaire CEO and more like someone's kind older brother. He stood when he saw her, gesturing to the table where 2 cups of coffee were already waiting. "I hope black is okay," he said. "I wasn't sure how you took it." It was such a normal, thoughtful gesture that Maya felt tears prick her eyes again. She was tired of crying, but kindness kept catching her off guard. "Black is perfect," she managed, sitting down across from him. James pulled out a leather notebook, flipping to a blank page. "I want to be clear about something from the start," he began, his tone serious but warm. "This isn't about me playing savior, or you being a charity case. I see this as an investment in someone with potential who's hit a rough patch. I did some thinking last night about how best to help without undermining your autonomy or dignity." He slid the notebook toward her. "So, I'm going to propose some options, and you tell me what feels right. This is your life, your choices. I'm just here to open doors that have been closed." Maya stared at the notebook, then at him, amazed at his thoughtfulness. "First," James continued, "immediate needs. You need stable housing, proper nutrition, basic necessities. I have a furnished apartment in a building I own. It's sitting empty, and you could stay there rent-free for 6 months while you get situated. Or, if that feels like too much, I can cover a modest apartment lease in your name for the same period." He paused, gauging her reaction. "Second, long-term goals. You mentioned you were studying to be a teacher. Do you want to return to college?" If so, I can arrange for your tuition and provide a living stipend. If not, or if you'd prefer to work first and study later, I can help you find employment, something that pays fairly and has growth potential. Maya's mind reeled. This was too much, too generous. Why? She asked again, the question that kept circling back. I know you said you want to pay forward kindness, but this is life-changing help. What if I fail? What if I'm not worth this investment? James leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. Maya, everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life. The system failed you, not because you weren't strong enough or smart enough, but because it's designed in a way that punishes people for being poor. You worked hard, you tried to do everything right, and circumstances beyond your control knocked you down. That's not a character flaw, it's bad luck combined with inadequate social support. He tapped the notebook thoughtfully. Here's what I know about you from one evening. You're honest, even when lying would be easier. You asked for a hug instead of money, which shows you understand what you really need. You're educated and had clear goals before trauma derailed you. And you have the courage to accept help, which is harder than most people think. James smiled slightly. As for what happens if you fail, I don't see it that way. If the teaching path doesn't work out, we try something else. If you need more time, we adjust the plan. The only way you fail is if you give up entirely, and I don't think you're the giving up type. You're still here, still fighting, even after everything. That tells me everything I need to know. Maya chose the apartment, a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with good public transportation. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, safe, and fully furnished with everything she needed. The first night there, she sat on the couch and cried, not from sadness this time, but from sheer relief. She had a home again, a place to lock the door and feel secure. A bed, a kitchen, a bathroom that was hers alone. James had also arranged for a prepaid debit card loaded with enough money for food and necessities for the month, with a promise that it would be replenished as needed. No tracking, no questions, he'd assured her. This is for you to use as you see fit. The second step was harder, confronting everything she'd lost. Maya spent a week just adjusting to stability, to the routine of regular meals and safe sleep. She gained back some weight, the hollow look in her eyes gradually fading. Then, with James's encouragement, she began the practical work of rebuilding. She got a new phone, set up a bank account, ordered replacement identification documents. Each task felt monumental, but James had connected her with a social worker from one of his nonprofit partnerships who helped navigate the bureaucracy. Slowly, piece by piece, Maya began to exist in the world again, not as a homeless girl hiding in shadows, but as a person with a future. The third week, she met with an academic advisor at the community college. Her previous credits were still valid, and with James's financial support, she could re-enroll for the spring semester. But as Maya sat in the advisor's office, looking at course catalogs and degree requirements, something felt off. She had chosen education because it seemed practical, stable, a way to honor her mother's belief in the power of learning. But was it what she truly wanted? That evening, she called James. Their daily check-ins had become a comfortable routine. Can I ask you something? She began hesitantly. What if I'm not sure about teaching anymore? What if going back to my old plan feels like putting on clothes that don't fit? There was a pause, then James's warm laugh. Then we figure out what is fit, he said simply. Maya, the goal isn't to recreate your old life. It's to build a new one that works for who you are now. You've been through trauma and hardship that changed you. It makes sense that your dreams might have changed too. His words were like permission she didn't know she needed. What do you really want to do? He asked. Maya closed her eyes, letting herself dream for the first time in months. Images flooded her mind, not of classrooms, but of helping people like her, of working with the homeless population, of creating better systems and support networks. I want to do what you do, she said softly. Not the business part, but the helping part. I want to work in social services, maybe get a degree in social work. I want to make sure other people don't fall through the cracks like I did. Now that, James said, and she could hear the smile in his voice, sounds like someone who's found their calling. Let's make it happen. Over the next few days, They researched programs together, finding a bachelor's program in social work that excited Maya. James arranged for her to shadow some social workers in his nonprofit network to see the reality of the work beyond the idealistic vision. Maya threw herself into it with an intensity that surprised her, attending orientations, asking questions, volunteering at a local shelter. She was building not just a life, but a purpose. And for the first time since her mother's death, she felt like herself again. Not the girl she'd been before, but someone stronger, someone forged by hardship into something more resilient and compassionate. 3 months into her new life, Maya faced her first real test. She was settled into her apartment, enrolled in classes, even working part-time at one of James's nonprofit organizations helping other homeless youth navigate the system. Life had found a rhythm, a pattern of normalcy she'd craved. Then her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she answered.
Maya?
It's your Uncle Derek. Her stomach dropped. Derek was her mother's brother, a man she barely knew. He'd been absent during her mother's illness, showed up drunk to the funeral, and disappeared again. How did you get this number? She asked coldly. I have my ways, Derek said, his voice carrying that familiar slur. Heard through the grapevine that you've come into some money. Living in a nice apartment, going to school again. That's real nice, Maya. Real nice how you're doing so well while family struggles. The implication was clear. He wanted money. Maya's hand tightened on the phone. I don't have any money, Derek. I'm being helped by a charitable organization. There's nothing I can give you. She heard him laugh, ugly and bitter. Charitable organization? I saw the guy you've been meeting with at coffee shops. James Mitchell, the billionaire. You sleeping with him? That's how you're paying for all this. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Maya ended the call, her hands shaking with anger and hurt. But Derek's poison had found its mark. Over the next few days, the question haunted her. What did people think about her arrangement with James? Did it look inappropriate? Was she naive to believe he expected nothing in return? When James suggested their usual coffee meeting, Maya almost canceled. Instead, she decided to confront it directly. Sitting across from him at their regular table, she blurted out, Do people think we're sleeping together? James looked up from his coffee, genuinely surprised.
What?
Maya felt her face flush. My uncle called. He implied that you're helping me because we're involved romantically. I need to know if that's what people think. James set down his cup carefully, his expression serious. First, who cares what people think? You, and I know the truth of our relationship. But to answer your question, I've been very careful about how this is structured precisely to avoid that kind of speculation. All the financial support goes through my foundation's programs, documented as educational and housing assistance. We meet in public places, and I've never been alone with you in your apartment or anywhere that could be misconstrued. He leaned forward. Maya, I'm mentoring you, and yes, we've become friends. But there's no romantic component here, nor will there ever be. Not because you're not worthy of that, but because it would compromise everything we're building and make the power dynamic incredibly inappropriate. His directness eased some of Maya's anxiety, but not all of it. Your uncle's call bothers you, for another reason, James observed quietly. It's not just about what people think, it's about him trying to take something from you again. Maya nodded, tears threatening. He wasn't there when Mom was dying. Didn't help with bills or the funeral or anything. And now he shows up demanding money I don't even have? It makes me so angry. She paused, then admitted the deeper fear. And part of me worries he's right, that I don't deserve this help, that I'm taking something that should go to someone more worthy. James reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. That's survivor's guilt talking. You deserve stability and opportunity just as much as anyone else. Your uncle is trying to manipulate you because he sees you succeeding where he's failed. Don't let him. Maya decided to fight back against the negativity in her own way by following James's example of paying kindness forward. Even with her limited resources, she began volunteering more hours at the shelter, using her own experience to connect with clients in ways the other staff couldn't. She understood the shame of needing help, the fear of being judged, the exhaustion of trying to navigate systems that seemed designed to exclude rather than assist. One evening, she encountered a teenage girl sitting alone in the shelter's common area, her entire body language screaming defensive isolation. Maya recognized that posture. It had been hers not so long ago. "Mind if I sit?" Maya asked gently. The girl shrugged, which Maya took as permission. She didn't immediately launch into questions or advice. Instead, she simply sat, present and patient. After several minutes of silence, the girl spoke. "Everyone wants to know my story. Like it matters how I got here. Like if I tell it enough times, someone will wave a magic wand and fix everything." Her voice was bitter, tired. Maya nodded. "Stories matter, but so does action. What do you need right now, today? Not your whole life story, just what would make tonight easier." The girl looked surprised by the question, then thoughtful. "Clean clothes," she finally said. "I'm tired of feeling dirty." Maya spent the next hour helping the girl, whose name was Sierra, sort through the donation closet, finding clothes that fit and didn't look too obviously charity-provided. They talked while they worked, and Maya shared pieces of her own story. Not in a preachy way, but just as one person to another who understood. When Sierra mentioned she'd been trying to finish high school but lost her textbooks, Maya made a note to ask James about his foundation's educational resources. By the end of the evening, Sierra was smiling, a small, tentative thing, but real. "Thanks," she said quietly, "for treating me like a person, not a problem." Maya knew exactly what she meant. Over the next few weeks, Maya made Sierra her informal project. She helped her get enrolled in a GED program, connected her with a therapist from James's nonprofit network, advocated with the shelter staff to get her a more stable bed assignment. She saw herself in Sierra, the intelligence being wasted, the potential being squandered by circumstances beyond control. When she told James about it during one of their coffee meetings, he listened with that focused attention she'd come to value. "You're becoming a mentor," he observed. "How does that feel?" Maya considered the question. "Terrifying and right," she finally answered. "I'm still figuring out my own life, but somehow helping her helps me too. It makes everything I went through feel less random, more purposeful." James smiled, the proud kind of smile that made Maya's chest warm. "That's exactly right. Trauma can either destroy us or transform us into people with deeper empathy and understanding. You're choosing transformation." He paused, then said carefully, "I've been thinking about your career path. You're good at this work, Maya, connecting with people, seeing what they need, navigating systems. Have you considered that you might be even more effective in policy or advocacy roles? Not instead of direct service, but in addition to it." The suggestion opened new doors in Maya's mind. She'd been so focused on helping individuals that she hadn't considered fighting the larger systemic issues that created homelessness in the first place. "Tell me more," she said, leaning forward with interest. 6 months after that rainy night, James invited Maya to a fundraising gala for his foundation. "I want you to see this side of the work," he explained. "Understanding where resources come from helps you think strategically about sustainability and growth." Maya's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't belong in that world of wealth and glamour. But James insisted, even arranging for a personal shopper to help her find an appropriate dress. "Think of it as professional development," he said with a slight smile. "And, besides, I'd like to introduce you to some people who might be valuable connections for your career." So Maya found herself in an elegant ballroom, wearing a simple but beautiful navy dress, feeling like an imposter among the wealthy donors. James stayed close at first, introducing her to various people as one of our program's biggest success stories and now a valuable team member. Maya hated being labeled a success story. It felt reductive, like her entire complicated journey could be summarized as a before and after transformation. But she understood the narrative was important for fundraising, so she smiled and shared appropriate details when asked. What surprised her was how many people were genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about what had helped most, what barriers still existed, how programs could be improved. She found herself speaking passionately about gaps in services, about the need for trauma-informed care, about the importance of treating homeless individuals with dignity. Halfway through the evening, a woman approached her. She was probably in her 50s, elegantly dressed, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. "You're the girl James found in the rain," she said without preamble. Maya bristled slightly at being called a girl, but nodded. "I'm Caroline Winters. I run the Winters Foundation. We focus on housing policy and homelessness prevention." She studied Maya with unabashed curiosity. "James talks about you constantly. Says you're going to change the whole system." Maya laughed nervously. "I think he's overly optimistic." Caroline shook her head. "James doesn't waste words or hope on lost causes. If he believes in you, there's something there. Tell me, what would you change about current homelessness policy if you could?" For the next 20 minutes, Maya found herself in deep conversation with one of the most influential philanthropists in the country, discussing policy ideas she'd barely dared to articulate before. Caroline listened intently, occasionally challenging her assumptions or offering alternative perspectives. By the end, she handed Maya a business card. "Call me when you graduate. The Winters Foundation could use someone with your perspective and passion. We need people who've lived the reality, not just studied it academically." Maya stared at the card in wonder. This was the world James had been trying to show her, a world where her painful experiences could become her greatest asset, where her voice could actually matter. Later that evening, she found James on the terrace, taking a break from the crowd. "You orchestrated that conversation with Caroline, didn't you?" she asked, joining him at the railing. He smiled slightly. "I may have mentioned to her that you'd be here. But the conversation itself was all you, Maya. Caroline doesn't humor people. If she wasn't impressed, she would have moved on after 2 minutes." He turned to face her fully. "You're ready for the next level of this work. You just needed to see that people like Caroline would take you seriously." Maya felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind, born of gratitude and possibility. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For stopping that night, for seeing potential in me when I couldn't see it myself, for pushing me to dream bigger." James's expression softened. "You did the hard work, Maya. I just opened a door." 2 years after that rainy night, Maya stood outside the same shelter where James had first found her. But this time, she wasn't seeking help. She was there to give it. She'd graduated with her degree in social work and had accepted a position with the Winters Foundation designing and implementing innovative housing-first programs. James attended her graduation, sitting beside Sierra, who'd also made tremendous progress and was now working as a peer counselor while finishing community college. The three of them had become an unlikely family, bound not by blood but by shared experience and genuine care. Maya thought about how much had changed, how far she'd come from that desperate girl who asked a stranger to pretend to hug her. That stranger had become her mentor, her friend, and in many ways, the catalyst for her transformation. But Maya understood now that James hadn't saved her. He'd given her tools and opportunity, but she'd done the actual work of saving herself. She'd faced her trauma, rebuilt her life from scratch, and transformed her pain into purpose. Today, she was launching a new pilot program based on her own experiences, a rapid response system for newly homeless individuals designed to intervene before they fell too deeply into the system. It would provide immediate housing, wraparound services, and peer support, all informed by the principle that everyone deserves dignity and genuine care, not just charity. James arrived at the shelter for the program launch, and Maya felt a familiar warmth at seeing him. Their relationship had evolved into something neither could quite name. Not romance, despite what people sometimes assumed, but something deeper and more enduring. They were connected by a shared belief in human potential and a commitment to creating systemic change. "Nervous?" James asked, standing beside her as they waited for the press conference to begin. Maya smiled, terrified, but also ready. She glanced at him. "You know, I've never properly thanked you for what you did that night. You could have just walked past me like everyone else." James shook his head. "I told you once. I was paying forward kindness I received. But now you're doing the same thing, creating systems that will help thousands of people. That's the real impact, Maya. It's not one person saving another. It's creating a chain reaction of care and support that keeps expanding outward. He paused, then added quietly, I'm proud of you. Not because of what you've achieved, though that's impressive, but because of who you've become. Someone who refuses to let suffering be meaningless, who insists on transforming it into something that helps others. Maya felt tears threaten, but blinked them back. We should go in, she said. It's time. The press conference went well. Maya spoke with passion and authority about the program, fielding questions from reporters and explaining the research behind their approach. Sierra shared her own story, and James talked about the Foundation's commitment to innovative solutions. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Maya stood alone for a moment in the shelter's common area. A young woman sat in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, that familiar look of defensive isolation on her face. Maya recognized that posture instantly. Walking over slowly, she sat down nearby, close enough to signal availability, far enough to respect boundaries. Mind if I sit? She asked gently. The young woman shrugged, a gesture Maya knew well. I'm Maya, she continued. I work here now, but 2 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you are. So I get it. The fear, the exhaustion, the feeling that you're invisible. The woman looked up, meeting Maya's eyes for the first time. Maya saw her own past in that gaze, the desperation mixed with fading hope. What's your name? She asked. Rachel, the woman whispered. Maya smiled warmly. Hi, Rachel. I can't promise everything will be easy, but I can promise you're not alone anymore. We're going to figure this out together. And as she said it, Maya thought about James, about how one person's kindness on a rain-soaked street had changed everything. Now, it was her turn to be that person for someone else. The cycle continued, expanding outward in ripples of care and transformation. Sometimes, she thought, the most powerful thing you can do is simply see someone's humanity when the world has taught them they're invisible. Sometimes a hug, real or pretended, is where healing begins. And sometimes, that beginning grows into something beautiful and purposeful that reaches far beyond what either person could have imagined.